By hating death, you become its servant. By loving it, you become its master. You must always choose love, the first rite of devotion. A dark faith for a darkening city. Justice is balance. Within the towering walls of Corel, all bow to the Order's authority. Grayshade is the supreme executor of the Order's edicts, until he does the most dangerous thing an acolyte of Argoth can do. He begins to ask questions and search for answers. Now, you can join his search. Independent publisher Athos Arts has just published the novel Grayshade, a dark fantasy by award-winning author Gregory A. Wilson. Now the world expands. Alligator Alley Entertainment, publishers of Tales and Tomes from the Forbidden Library and Expedition from the Mysterious Peaks, is pleased to announce its Kickstarter for the Grayshade universe, supporting two major product lines. First, Athos Arts' publication of Books 2 and 3 in the Grey Assassin trilogy, Renegade and Heretic, and second, Alligator Alley's publication of a brand new Grayshade tabletop role-playing game, powered by the 5th edition of the world's greatest role-playing game and designed by writers Aaron Rosenberg and Rich Lescouflair. This game will give you the chance to explore the streets of Corel for yourselves, with detailed city maps, secret histories, unique starting classes, custom magic systems and mechanics, and more. The acclaimed gaming accessory maker Norse Foundry will be producing a limited edition, individually numbered Founders coin for founding backers based on the Grayshade world, featuring an illustration by artist Tallytoons. Years of work have gone into this project, from concept to design to execution, and we've assembled a team of experts dedicated to launching this new world with some of the best speculative fiction and tabletop role-playing experiences possible. But to truly realize our vision, one final component remains: you. Join Gregory A. Wilson, Alligator Alley, Athos Arts, Norse Foundry, and our team of dedicated creatives by supporting the project and spreading the word. Thank you. Together, we will bring the world of the Grey Assassin to full and vibrant life. You must always choose love.
Ah, yes. Oh, man, freaking love it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome, Arvanauts. Welcome, everyone, to an unusual, I would say, Wednesday night stream. I do not usually stream on this evening, but we are streaming here today, and we're doing so because of this project, which many of you have now heard many things about, which made great progress today, and I am hoping that we will continue to make great progress on this throughout the evening tonight. We are currently we have broken through 11,000. So we are now 11,033. We're up to 137 backers. That means that we are 63 backers shy of our new bonus class for the Grayshade 5e RPG, and it means also that we are closing in on 50% funded, which is also a big deal. So there's a lot of good stuff to like about this movement, and I hope this continues, and you will continue to spread the word about this in the ways that we have been talking about. I've got another special event for you planned for this evening, but before we get there, just a couple of quick notes here. Normally at this point I talk a lot about the channel, but all I'm going to mention today about the channel is I'm going to ask everybody to follow the channel if you haven't done so already on Twitch, twitch.tv/ArvinElleron, for those of you watching this later on. And if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel as well, !ArvTube in chat to be able to see how you can link over to that. Other than that, though, the focus that I want to put on today is for the Grayshade Kickstarter, !Grayshade KS, which is the Kickstarter that we are running to support several things. First of all, the publication of books 2 and 3 in my Grey Assassin trilogy being published by Athos Arts. Grayshade, the novel, came out a few weeks back, but Renegade and Heretic are next up on the list, and those will be published by Athos Arts. There will also be a 5e RPG, a game, tabletop role-playing game of Grayshade, produced by Alligator Alley Entertainment. That will be Aaron Rosenberg along with Rich Lescouflair as the lead designers, and it will feature multiple possible new classes, a new magic system, a couple of new mechanics. I talked about the biggest new mechanic last night, which is called Faith. So there's that mechanic and a bunch of other things relating to the actual city of Corel, a map of the district, various aspects of the district, information about them, breaking them down in some detail. And then there will be, of course, NPCs. There will be fleshed out even further, and you will have adventure hooks and one full adventure within there. So it's going to be super, super exciting for that. That's going to be happening as part of this 5e game. There is a Norse Foundry, as you folks know, coin, a Founder's coin with Tari Toons, our own Tari Toons, doing the illustration for this coin. And it is a limited edition and numbered coin, which is being produced by the incredible company Norse Foundry. And the earlier you back and pledge for it, the lower the number will be. And as things move forward, we might even be able to do even cooler things with that coin. So again, that is another really cool thing that's being added to this. And as we announced last night, there is also an audiobook, which was originally going to be a stretch goal, but is now going to be a core goal. It will be funded when we fund. And that means once we hit that 25,000 funding goal, then Trend Sparks' audiobook will be visible as well, or will be available at that point as well. And if you have already pledged, you can pledge right now and add it on at any pledge level at $10 per. All you have to do is add that $10 pledge level and you're good to go. So I am very excited for that audiobook, and so excited about it, in fact, that next Friday, not this Friday, but next Friday, there is going to be a special event featuring Tren with, get this, a 2-hour stream of Tren, first of all, playing a part of a pre-recorded aspect of the Grayshade audiobook, with Tren stopping and commenting on various aspects of how he did this, that, and the other thing. Here's how I managed that voice. Here's what I had to think about in terms of breathing. Here was this funny thing about the pronunciation of this word, etc., etc. And then in the second half of that stream, there will be, actually, Tren will be live recording a bit from the Grayshade audiobook as well. Now, these will not be spoilers, in case you're curious. They will not be things from deep into the book where they give out all this kind of information, but it's stuff which will give you a chance to kind of see behind the scenes of a professional audiobook narrator who does many of the books for Battletech and Shadowrun, and a person with a lot of experience in this area. I think it's going to be really exciting. It's going to be happening on this channel, and that's going to be happening a week from this Friday, and it's called So You Think You Can Narrate Grayshade. And we're going to be doing that a week from Friday with Trend. So that's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm excited for that. Last night we had Rich Lescouflair and Chris Negelin from Alligator Alley joining Brandon O'Brien and myself to talk a little bit about the game mechanics and things like that. But tonight it's going to be something different. We have someone else from Alligator Alley who I'm going to be happy to introduce. But just before I go there, again, any support that people can give in terms of pledges, spreading the word and the like, excuse me, and spreading the word and the like for the Kickstarter would be great. I'd love to get out of this stream today at 11:02 or something like that, 11:01, 11:02. That would be really awesome if we could. But either way, just having that information out there for people would be super valuable if we could do that. So with that said, I am now going to unmute myself and apologize unreservedly for whoever I may have unintentionally interrupted, because I can't hear them yet. Now I am going to... That would be Eric. Now I'm going to unmute them. And last but certainly not least, I'm going to transition over to reveal the new crew. Well, one person is a member of the new crew. The other person was with me last night, was not in fact blown away by a tropical cyclone. Tropical storm is still with us, and so that's good. But it is my great pleasure to welcome both Brandon O'Brien and Eric Wiener into the show. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I want to first of all get to Brandon and just make sure, Brandon, it's good to see you. For those of you who don't know what's going on with you, how has life been with you? And are you indeed safe for the moment from the depredations of tropical storms? Just for the moment.
I am presently safe and dry and sound. Who knows what the future may bring in this region? Tropical storms and the like are very regular, but yep. Suffice it to say that at the moment, very comically and serendipitously, God decided to prove that he does in fact have a Trinidad and Tobago passport by generating the cyclone just close enough for us to know that it was still there, but not so close that it would hit anyone. And just passed very safely over the Twin Island nation of Trinidad and Tobago. We've been having some very powerful thunderstorms and the like for most of today, which has also recently dispersed. So right now we are perfectly safe, and I'm very glad to be able to say that I am with you all now, ready to talk about RPGs again, because I think that Grayshade is going to be really rad.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Always a pleasure, my friend. And I am glad legitimately that you're safe, not just because I'm glad you're here with us, but I'm glad you're just here in general. So that's good. I'm glad that everything worked out there. And that leads us to the second person that we have who was not with us last night. And that is Eric Wiener, who has now, we were joking before that when we first started this, Eric looked a little bit like in witness protection. And so every time I come back over to Zoom, there's more light that's been added. And so now you see a fully operational battle station lighting system, I guess, of Eric. So Eric, welcome. Now fully, lit up in a professional way from all sources, I guess, and all places. How are you doing? Good to see you. And for those of you who don't know you, because I know you have not, you have been on, I'm pretty sure you've been on the channel once before, but please, for those who don't know as much about you, tell folks, if you could, a little bit about your background and that sort of thing, if you wouldn't mind.
All right. Well, I mean, just sticking with the game industry background, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
So I was the manager of a retail store in South Florida for about 5 years, as I was bumming around in between different financial careers, and then starting in 2000, I partnered up with some folks, local friends of mine, know for a very long time. We had a company, Paradigm Concepts. Company's still around, right? They do great work. So people might know them better from like the products. So like Arcanus, The World of Shattered Empires, which is a 2-time Origins Award winning game. Won their setting book, Codex Arcanus, which was very, very pivotal in its creation in 2007. And then in, I want to say 2011 or 2012, Arcanus, the role-playing game, in which I created the engine, and Pedro Barnechea, my very good friend, who's the lead designer for their 5e version of Arcanus right now, put all the features, right? So if it was a car, I did the engine and the transmission, all that, and he did all the, he did the bucket seats and the features,
right,
doodads. It was a very successful game, very well received critically, and I think it's a product I'm very, very proud of. So that's what I did there. A few years back, Brian really wanted to, our good late friend Brian really wanted to start making some products. He had some ideas, and Rich had an idea for a science fiction game, and I'm like, sure, Rich, we'll talk about it, right? And it turns out to be just stupendous, right?
And that's right there. As for Genesis.
Yeah, as for Genesis, that's right. Yeah. It's really funny because one of the very first things he did before we were ever partners or ever in on anything, right? I was like, "What's the name of your game?" And I don't know, it was something. And like, what does that mean, right? And what does that mean? Like, what is that, right? And eventually he settles on Espergenesis. I'm like, that sounds like something weird. Right?
That sounds like something science-y and Genesis-y. So
yeah, exactly, right. Yeah. And it was great, so we came together. He did some very impressive layout stuff, and he really had just unbelievable understanding of 5e, right?
Yeah. I
don't normally, sometimes it's hard to find people that get somebody else's product, right, on how to do it, and it was just great. So we just put it all together and made a team. So I had all my production experience and all my play testing and organized play and all of that I could put together. And then Rich put in that rules engine and Brian's great creative eye, and that's we made ourselves a company, did some pretty good stuff.
Yeah, he did. And I was lucky enough to be able to connect with them, contacted Brian and Rich first, and then had the chance to get to know Eric as well. And I like that engine analogy, because I think there's a lot to that. And I'm going to, obviously I'm going to let Brandon again drive this train, but I am going to show off because it's going to be part of what we're talking about. So this is Witch Hunter, the Invisible World 2nd edition. And this is actually was given to me by Eric at, I think, maybe last year's Origins, I want to say. And it might have been Gen Con. But anyway, it was given to me by Eric. And Eric was the lead designer on this, can confirm, says it right there on the front page. But the thing that really struck me about this, and one of the reasons that I was happy to have Eric on, was not just because Eric is co-owner of Alligator Alley Entertainment, but because the feel of this thing, it drips with atmosphere in the same sort of way that I imagine Grayshade dripping with atmosphere. Now, it's not the same atmosphere, because this is, 16th century witch hunting, or 17th century, I should say, witch hunting. The first letter is signed from Salem, Massachusetts, so it's that kind of feel. But the point is, everything in terms of the design, the pictures, there are some colors in here, but most of the color aesthetic just has, like, as an example, and I know this is just the art, but the point is the art itself is reflective of the overall tone of a lot of the spells, the skills, Spirit Brother, wearing the beast's skin, first circle of binding, diagram of insight, just these things that you just read it and you're like, yep, I'm there. And we were talking off air just before we came on about Blades in the Dark, and how how this is also something that has that profound, like, I get what the city, things like Dunwall, I get what it's like. I get what it feels like. I understand what it's like. And so that was the other reason I thought it would be good to have Eric on to talk more specifically, hopefully tonight, about atmosphere and mood and how we're doing that to be created as part of Grayshade. So that is my thought about that. Go ahead, Eric, and then I'll let Brandon take over.
I like product wise, right? That is what I brought to the table was, the Witch Hunter game that I developed and, like, really refined, right? It was very much a group effort to create. But the first edition is a great game, but it had some lumps, right? So to really design it. So creatively, when you're talking about atmosphere, I don't want to spoil too much about it, but this visual appearance is a conscious choice, because it's supposed to look like the book you, as an apprentice witch hunter, like a book you might be given of secret lore. So the reason even though we did full color interior, there was a choice for black and white art, and that's not a money saver. I know it seems weird, but really doing black and white art anymore, it's not really a money saver, especially when you're doing a full color printing process. So those are like, wood cutting sort of imprints into it. And then anytime that you have like a full page thing, if anyone has seen a very, very authentic old-timey 17th century book, there's literally an original painting dropped right into it. So when you'll have a full page piece of art in bright color, that's really like it's like a painting, like, just inserted into it. Now that I want to, like, show one, I can't find it. Okay. So you'll have the whole piece. This is in the premise. This is like a painting, and it still has all the edges and
yep
in the book, right? So that was very important, that the book feels correct.
Yeah,
right?
It's
first edition didn't feel correct. It's a fine book, but it didn't feel correct.
Exactly. And the idea that this sets the mood so well for the player. I will just say the introduction is a letter written to, one of these, like, a witch hunters, right? And the first part of it says, table of contents. The introduction is just, to you who read this by choice or chance, greetings. I know not who you are or how you may have come by this text. Indeed, as I write it, I have no assurance that I will live to complete it, nor that my words will outlive me long enough to be read by any but their author. In truth, such as a statement is true of any work done by the hands of man, for which of us can begin any day with absolute certainty that we will be alive when that day reaches its end? The Almighty has entrances and exits scripted for us all, and rare indeed is the man who knows the hour or nature of his end before it is visited upon him. It's just, and then it goes on from there to talk about, you think it's fantasy, but it's real type of thing. But it's very, very cool, and that, I think, is, again, that's part of that kind of mood stuff. So, Brandon, I'm sorry, but it's one of the things that really struck me, and I'm hoping Grayshade, and I believe we will, have that kind of similar feel. Again, not like the witch feel, but the point is it will have the darkness that is reflected by this, right? The sense of being in these dark alleys will, I think, also be reflected within how the game book itself and the game world comes across. So, sorry, Brandon. On you go.
Oh no, you don't need to apologize because you actually triggered a thought, which leads very quickly into the first question that I wanted to ask. Because an RPG rulebook is a book. It's not a picture book. It's not something that you're not supposed to at the end of the day read. And there are different documents that you read for different reasons all the time. A letter is not a novel, is not an encyclopedia, obviously, but a rule book is a very special kind of piece of art. Now that you've like put this thought in my brain, where a rule book is supposed to do certain things for a reader in and out of play. And seeing Witch Hunter and hearing about how Witch Hunter was developed uh, really intrigues me now about the question of whether a rulebook's job is not merely to present information, but also to inform what the reader is supposed to feel like when they play, even when they're not playing. And I'm kind of very excited to hear Eric talk more about that, if you can, about what you think in terms of its visual presentation. Grayshade will offer or is attempting to offer to readers, not only in preparation for the act of playing, but simply as an act of reading the book, in the same sense as the stuff that's inside Witch Hunter.
Well, I mean, going back with Witch Hunter, right? So, and I don't say that just because I make them. Like RPG books as a physical product and format are an incredibly challenging balance. There's not enough credit for what goes into it. I mean, there are people that will literally go to the movies, have a meal, drink some drinks, drop $120, and they're 7 hours of perfectly fine, lovely entertainment with someone, with like a date or something like that. And then the idea of like, oh, I'm going to spend more than $50 on something I'm going to play, for 5,000 hours. What's wrong with you, right? It's so in there, but. And so first and foremost, it really does have to present information. It has to have all of the utility of a reference book. And I don't know about you, but when you go to the reference section of the library, those books are not exciting to look at, right? So
I mean, I'm a nerd, but still.
they might be exciting to go through, but they're not exciting to look at, right?
Mhm.
And then and then you get into then you want that appearance almost like an art book, right? And then, so it has to have the utility of a reference book. It's got the appearance of an art book, but then it's got to be engaging like fiction, right? Because if somebody's bored reading your rule book, they're never going to play your game because they assume they're going to be bored playing your game.
Yep.
Right. And you have to put all those things together from different angles. And then we're supposed to deliver it for like less than like, a picture book of butterflies you buy for a girl for her birthday, or a boy, he likes butterflies, right? For your birthday, right? For their birthday, and it's $87 or whatever, and we're supposed to deliver it for a lot less money, right? So the whole idea on Witch Hunter here is it still has a useful table of contents, right? But we don't go too carried away. We kind of kept that a little simple, right?
Mhm.
But at the end, it's got a full index, right, where you can reference what you need. Everything is presented. We even have an index of every table that appears in the book. So you need a table for something, right? I'm still a little old school. I'm not quite, I'm not quite, I love to play fiasco, but that's not the way I design. I'm still very much giving you the whole piece, right? So it works that way, right? So with Witch Hunter, I want you, I'm setting the tone with that very first piece of fiction that he read the preamble to, right? Setting the tone of you're one of these guys, and you're going to be one of these guys, and the whole world is trying to kill you, right? There are people who you are protecting who will think you are also a horrible person using dark forces that will also try to kill you, right? So you've got a whole thing and the whole balance in there, right? And then you got the adversary, which is the devil for all intents and purposes, and sure, he wants to kill you, but you know what, he also love just have you join him, right? So there's always a little freebie take the freebie. What could go wrong? You can have a little extra freebie power, right? So you've got all that built into it, right? So when we switch over and think about something like Grayshade, now obviously Grayshade's not going to have a 17th century Solomon Kane guidebook to, this is a little Eurocentric. I have plans to do one to do like an Africa centric one and do a little bit more to the east as well. As it goes forward, but there's just only so much time in the world, right? But I want you to feel like you're one of these people, right? You're really the chosen champion of mankind, and this is the book. And you've been trained because werewolves ate your mentor or whatever. I mean, you really learn what you have to do. So when we go with something like Grayshade, right? I picked the physical copy. I probably could have an ebook or something like a PDF of it or whatever. But I picked a physical copy from Greg just a couple of weeks ago when I was at Origins, because I love just to hold a book. I read
Same.
by holding a book, right? So I'm just about to crack that through, so I have a real complete understanding of what we want to feel. But from what I already understand, you've got a world of subtlety and intrigue and moral judgment, and maybe everything isn't as it seems, and yeah, it's the holy mission, but people are in charge of that. And you've got a city of like intrigue and backstabbing. You've got hostile fates, and we're talking about magic that's all based upon misdirection, confusion, clandestine, right? So you got Grayshade's assassination game, but it could also be a thieving game. It can also be there's a little in there.
Yep.
So if we want to come and do that, it has to be dark. It has to be mysterious. It has to be intrigue ridden, right? The fonts have to say like, faux Renaissance, right? Almost as you get with it, just so it feels like that. But again, everyone needs to know where to find everything, what the adventures are, and where all the locations are, and how all the stuff works. So the big point there is just nailing how we want things to look, and starting to decide like every time, if you really want to project like one of the assassin priests of or these gods that the vengeful person, well, we have the way we want it to look, right? In Witch Hunter, we shortcutted it. We had our orders, right? It's a very faction driven thing. It's a very 80s and 90s kind of game kind of thing, right? Where Vampire has all the clans, and Deadlands has the different shadow organizations.
Yep.
And et cetera,
Yep.
right? Well, we want to identify that, and by the way we do that, we visually represent it is we use the same member of each one of these orders in our artwork icon. So you're going to see the Lightbringer woman every time we show a Lightbringer, and you're going to see the same Stalker every time, and the same Ghost Warrior every time, and the same aesthetic every time. So we just want to say that this is what they look like, right? We know who now. When you look at it, this is the person we're talking about. So the characters remain iconic all the way through, right? And then of course we've got all the indications, right? We're not going to be as the Witch Hunter. I've received mild grief, but I think people mostly get it, right? Witch Hunter doesn't really play nice on sensitivity. I mean, I don't mean that I'm just being a big jerk. I mean, compared to the 17th century, it's Christmas and happy fun candy. It's great, but there's a lot more egalitarian. You've got there's kind of a Rosie the Riveter sort of moment for like more female characters, et cetera, et cetera. But it's it is still a game in which you hunt people who do the wrong thing and monsters that are impersonating them and then do terrible things to them. Like Solomon Kane stories are not cuddly stories, right? So
Witch Hunter is not a cuddly style game, is what you're saying. It's
correct.
Not, yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. It's also not like emotional trauma trigger warning.
Right. No. Yeah, but
that's not what I'm going for. But we're not making apologies. We're not making apologies for how really nasty the Spanish were as colonists, but we're also not making apologies for how really unpleasant the Mexica were to their neighbors, right? Things were what they were, and it just is what it is, and you know, and it goes forward. So when we talk about something like Grayshade being a fictional world, right? We have the freedom to be a little bit more. We have the freedom conceptually, right, as we design it. And Greg, knock me off if I'm wrong, because again, I'm going from discussions, not having read it yet, and I really need to read it, but I'm just so busy, right, for work. Is we can make the parts of inclusivity, like everyone can play this and everyone can play what they want ourselves, because we are going to determine the rules and by which the world. We did not start with birth here, right? There's definitely a Venice, inspiration. There's definitely, some of that, but it's the way we want it to be. So when we go through and we write, and I'm going to go long here, but when you go through and you write down exactly what you want it to look like, we also want to convey. So if we want to be, it's like, hey, there are, it's a very multi-ethnic city. We want various other groups here. It's like, great. We pick our iconic character and they are that person, and we're just there, right? We want, we want to show, gender representation. We just show it. We want those characters there. We just make them, right? So it's going to give us a lot of ability to just really be inclusive and fun, but without sacrificing the message.
I'll add to that and Venice itself, of course, was extremely diverse and multivariegated. We talked about this last night, actually, a little bit. And what this does is provide the opportunity to kind of expand upon agency, which did exist within those groups, but were existing around or functioned around existing power structures. And here we develop the power structures and how one battles against them. And as Brandon knows, in the novel and in characters that may or may not show up as NPCs later on in the game version of this, there are very clearly those who work against a kind of broader systemic oppression, and I can't say more about that. But there's an underground aspect to it. I'll just say that, and Brandon will know what I mean. But that's definitely something which comes here in the game as well. So yeah, and just very quickly, the font thing too. The fonts are, as you said, reflective of that, but. Garlic Tofu was mentioning in chat that, of course, the Athos novel, my novel Grayshade, is based upon the font used for that is based upon 15th century Venetian typesetting, which is demonstrative, first of all, of the detail with which Athos, does their work, but also I think is reflective of that same kind of mood that we're talking about and establishing there.
Nice. So I want to pivot immediately from that point to get into a thing that I'm really excited about hearing more about, because there is a very strong through line from Witch Hunter to Grayshade the novel to what will eventually be Grayshade the RPG. But before we get to that point, I want to read one of my favorite quotes, which is unfortunately not from either of you fine gentlemen, but you will understand why it's a very important quote when I read it. And before I give you any context, I'm just going to read the quote.
Okay.
Down these mean streets a man must go who is not himself mean, but is neither tarnished nor afraid. He is the hero. He is everything. He must be a complete man and a common man and yet an unusual man. He must be, to use a rather weathered phrase, a man of honor. By instinct, by inevitability, without thought of it, and certainly without saying it. He must be the best man in his world and a good enough man for any world. He will take no man's money dishonestly and no man's insolence without a due and dispassionate revenge. He's a lonely man, and his pride is that you will treat him as a proud man, or be very sorry you ever saw him. The story is this man's adventure in search of a hidden truth, and it would be no adventure if it did not happen to a man fit for adventure. If there were enough like him, the world would be a very safe place to live in, without becoming too dull to be worth living in. That's
great.
Is the description of a hero of a hard-boiled detective story as written by Raymond Chandler in the essay, The Simple Art of Murder. And I bring it up because fantasy noir really excites me as a kind of narrative subgenre. It's been getting a great resurgence lately in a lot of other pieces of media. A lot of urban fantasy uses it a lot, but um, visiting the trappings of high fantasy with those noir elements has also been very rich in the veins of contemporary genre media. Um, I see it a lot, obviously, in Witch Hunter in the way that it is presently described as essentially the story of a person going out into the world and discovering evidence of the invisible world of monsters destroying the safety and sanctity of mortal life, and discovering that you are the only person as a result who can do anything about it, and knowing that no one trusts you because you're the guy with the gun and all of the knowledge of the devil.
Yeah.
But they trust you enough that they will give you the capacity to make sure people don't eat them in the middle of the night. And obviously a lot of that energy is in Grayshade as well. With our protagonist literally given the power and the responsibility to take lives in the service of something that he believes is greater than himself, and now being thrust into the mystery of discovering that maybe all is never what it seemed, and now he has to come to terms with what that means for him. And I think that one of the things that I'm really excited to see bear out atmospherically in the game is how do we create that experience for players, that um, reader level experience and player level experience of being put in the shoes of that Chandlerian version of a hero who is simultaneously given all this great responsibility and great access, while also struggling with the fact that the world is out to get you and everybody else around you, and no one trusts you or likes you, but you're the only person who can undertake this kind of journey.
What an incredibly evocative quote. And I knew it, as you were reading it, I'm like, it's got to be Chandler. And I mean, and by the way, in case anyone's curious about where Frank Miller's Batman came from, the not the hero we deserve, but it's the hero we need. And what I love about that is that as the prose continues, it almost carves around the image of this person. Someone who's carved out of the environment from which he must function. By which I mean, this isn't someone who, like Superman, just shows up as kind of a force from an alien planet and just appears, and then yes, Earth, he's adopted by Earth and blah 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 blah. Like, that's not what this is. Grayshade in this case is born of. This is all gonna be Batman quotes. I was born to the darkness. He was born in and born of these streets, and so Grayshade knows them backwards and forwards before he ever becomes an acolyte. And one of the lovely things about that quote that you just read, Brandon, is that as you almost can, as you're reading it, can see the detective falling into place, the investigator falling into place as the rain kind of falls around him. And that same image, I think, is reflected in the most evocative stories that we can imagine visually and otherwise. I brought up Blade Runner last night. That the rain, the continual rain set off against the neon backdrop of LA gives you everything you need to know about that. And of course, if you've read, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, that kind of vibrant sort of development of character through prose description is something which Philip K. Dick knows backwards and forwards also. So when I was thinking about Grayshade from a book point of view, from an author point of view, I wanted the idea that Grayshade comes from the shadows of these streets and thus is best suited to be able to work within them. And when he then, and the organization that he works for, come to blows, so to speak, he is one of the only ones suited to be able to understand those shadows better than they do, because he himself had a hand in not just being born to them, but in shaping them. And so he knows what's necessary to unshape them. And so I love that image, and that's, man, what a great quote. So sorry, Eric, you can jump in there, but I just, sign me up for more Chandler at all times.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, for sure. And I mean, and it's probably going to help a little bit too, because I'm an enormous fan of detective fiction, right? Everything from the old, noir, gumshoe, hard boiled sort of things, all the way through your Travis McGee, or even, the stuff like Jack Reacher, and I don't mean the Tom Cruise version. I mean like the real one. Right?
Yeah.
Right. And even sometimes the hero is unlikable, right?
Sure.
Narratively, right? It's like you talk about Batman, right? Well, narratively, Batman's not, in most of the stories, Batman's not the protagonist. Batman's the antagonist,
Yeah.
right? The job of the antagonist is to cause change in the protagonist's story. Well, Batman doesn't change, right? I'm not saying no story works like that. They've been writing them for a century or whatever, almost here, but not quite. But 90 years. So that doesn't really change. He doesn't change. The Joker changes. The Riddler changes. The whatever. So when you come through, it's the same thing is true with like Jack Reacher, right? Jack Reacher does not change. He is the same overly logical, practically murderous, force of nature, the size of a house, right? In everything, right? Everyone else has changed. Everyone else changes, right? So it's a very interesting, it's a very interesting dynamic. But detectives come through, and it's literally a game of observation. So when you come through, if we want Grayshade, something like Grayshade, he's going to reshape the city. Well, it's going to be a game of observation and intervention, right? So that becomes as much a mental game for the players as it becomes a capabilities game for the character on the sheet, right? And that's a lot of fun to do. Once you reach that level of understanding of the game.
And if I can just say there also, I would add to that the other thing about Grayshade, of course, and this is something that I think is reflected in the game here well. So Grayshade is a character in the first, I would say, before the book begins, Grayshade has essentially been a kind of version of Batman. The only real way in which Grayshade has changed is he's become more like himself. His faith has become stronger, his dedication to his craft, his dedication to the religious underpinnings of what he does. And yet, and this I think is very important, I think this is the thing that changes and makes this perhaps a bit different in some ways, is because he is also a person that at core has a conscience. It means that there is a corrosive effect to what Grayshade does. And that ever so slowly, like water would itself do, eats away at the stone foundation of this seemingly impregnable edifice, so that when the walls fall, it is pretty terrible to behold, and it's going to be interesting to see how Grayshade comes through all of that. That's how the novel operates, and I think within the game, that's reflected as well in the sense that there is the change that happens over the course of the book to Grayshade, and there will be change for the characters, but that change will be dependent on the type of class they play and the type of story that they want to tell. So they may end up being characters that, to use your example of Reacher, Eric, become almost more like themselves. I'm thinking about the noble class, for example, which kind of manipulates based on the power that they see around them. I think that there are many stories, and I hope players will tell many stories about how the noble changes things around, but still, the noble has certain defined characteristics that will somewhat be able to remain in place if they so choose. On the other hand, the Investigator, which is what Rockgod was talking about being pumped up about playing in chat, the Investigator is a character who, very much like we talked about the Chandelarian kind of hero, is going to be trying to find aspects of the city, and in the process of doing so, is going to have that shadow affect him or her, affect them in some way. And as they are affected by this, it means that they will have to change their method of investigation. They'll have to change the things that motivate them even. They'll have to decide whether or not they want to maintain certain lines of investigation or go in another direction. So there are opportunities here, I think, for people to tell both stories where they change and where they are changed. And both of those stories, I think, are interesting and can be told within the Grayshade universe, largely because the city of Corel is a place that allows you to do sort of as much or as little with it as you wish in terms of your own experience, as to whether you go out and try to change them or they change you. I'd also point out, by the way, that there is something, and this is something which both the kind of typical Batman and Reacher characters run into, in the end, there is sort of a limitation to the I'm the rock and you go ahead and try to move me, right? Because ultimately, Corel is a bigger city than Grayshade. Corel is a bigger city even than the Order of Argoth that he serves. And so in the game, players are going to have an opportunity to make these alterations, but it's going to take a lot if they really want to shake that city to its foundations. And I think they can. I think if anybody watched Brandon O'Brien bring the Strange Friends through a Blades in the Dark campaign, that shook Dunwall to its very foundations. But that took a while to get to that point where you could build those characters in a way that when it shook, you're like, well, damn. Like there's a lot going on there. And that, I think, is what I would like for Grayshade, the sense of a city that feels so intricate that there's so much that could be done with it. How would you ever understand it? And then recognizing that maybe if you want to tell this story, given long enough, you can straighten out the crooked streets in a way. I would be excited to see that kind of thing happen. So,
and when you come into that sort of thing, and you're talking about it, right? Some of the mechanical stuff we're going to incorporate, is a change, is a movement of the character.
True. Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Yep.
But to a certain point, to just make it so that you get that sense that it's this incredibly intricate city. One of the primary words, it's one of the, I don't want to call it a trick, but one of the methodologies is you don't explain, right? So you set up and you have out there, this is something that's going on. And that's it. When people run their game, why it's going on is their game, right? You have
to decide why it's happening. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
We've had, I remember, I'm going back to Arcanus, which we did for some time. There are entire people that run home games on throwaway lines in one of the chapters in the Codex, right?
Yep.
The Codex Arcanus, where we mentioned that there's, this lost city of Matawab and the Temple of the Monkey God. And then we don't explain what that is. And people come up to me, when are you going to write about that? We're always like, never. Then why is it in there? Somebody's got to have something to do.
Yeah.
And so they're able to do that. Yeah, and I do want to point that out, by the way. Grayshade the game does not require you to play Grayshade the novel, right? You don't need to play that plot. You play your own game within it. If you love that plot and you want to figure out a way to tell that story, that's fine. But Grayshade the novel is telling one story in a city that holds thousands. And so my hope is that the game allows you to play thousands, and not just the plot of Grayshade.
Yeah, definitely. Like RPGs exist because we're giving people the opportunity to experience their own story in this world, and sometimes it's very important to remind some players, hey, this is yours. This is not anybody else's. Like, I find Eric's answer to that question very hilarious, because if it were me, I would tell people, I don't need to write that story. You already did. You were there, weren't you? I want to know what happened.
Yeah.
I don't need to tell you. You need to tell me.
That's such a Blades GM thing too. Just be like, that's a good question. Why don't you answer that? Like, my students do that. My students in my classes, when they ask me a question, and when I'm like, interesting, and they're like, you're going to ask me about that same question, aren't you? I'm like, yes, indeed I am. Because you're right. Like, that really is putting them in charge and giving them agency. And I'll say very quickly as an aside, this game, Esper Genesis, Eric watched a live stream of this where I was talking about one aspect of the Shadow with the Zephyr campaign, written, of course, by the fine folks, freelancers working for Alligator Alley. And there was this one encounter with this, essentially a massive electrical space slug. It's a long story. And what my version of the space slug was, and also the way that a Bellare character played by Zach Clay responded to it, was not what they had expected. But their reaction was not, you've destroyed our blah, blah, blah. Their reaction was, that was awesome. It wasn't really what we were thinking about, but that's great. Like, I wanted to watch more of that, like that. And so Esper Genesis was drawn from their world, and even the adventure was drawn from their adventure, but also went in its own direction, which is why the players loved playing it, because it was their story, Brandon, as you pointed out. So I appreciate that Eric did not bring down the hammer of, this is not canon, upon us.
I'm a big believer that you almost can't play an RPG wrong, right? I mean, obviously, if you're like, making everyone mad and no one wants to play with you again, you're probably doing it wrong. But
That's
I'm just
true.
saying, if your group's together and you're all having fun and everybody's loving it, I'm sorry, man. Once you handed over your $50 for the core rule book, it's your game now.
Right.
Do whatever you want with it, right?
Right.
It's an Esper Genesis game, but I'm using Fate, and it's really an Iron Chef simulation. All right, whatever, dude. Thanks for the $50, right?
Yeah.
It's your game.
I really want a Space Fate Iron Chef set in Cat Rambo's.
Listen, man, you write that Crucible Core adventure, and I promise you will put it.
I bet you will. Oh, man.
It does, in fact, sound rad. Now I want it too. That would be hilarious.
Oh, man. Space Slug! I'm sorry, I just had this image of this guy.
Space Slug!
Space Slug!
So I want to pivot from that question and return to some of the world-building atmosphere that you had earlier spoke about. Because, again, in very hard-boiled style, I think about, like, that one opening crawl to your typical film noir with the voiceover, "This city will kill you." And one of the things that's very obvious about the setting of Corel in Grayshade is it will kill you. Quite literally, there are people whose duty it is to look for you and kill you. And in particular, one of the things that fascinate me a lot about the setting of Corel is that a large portion of its leadership, of the people who have power in that setting, are warring theocratic communities. And in particular, that their conflict is not even necessarily only with themselves, but with the very faithful core of all of the people around them. That they're constantly making decisions on behalf of their god for people who do not worship them, or in a lot of ways attempting to remove faith communities precisely because they don't share the same beliefs. And I'm very intrigued to hear more about whether and how the game is going to have those forces in particular, alongside political nobles and the merchant class who always act upon the will of the common man in these kinds of settings. But in particular, religion is also very powerful, and in a setting where religion also has the power to literally sick assassins on you, I'm very curious to hear how the wheels of both the mechanics and the story will turn in such a way as to always place that faithful pressure on players.
I can take that first, I guess. So one of the things that that we really wanted to focus on when I was talking with Aaron Rosenberg, the designer, along with Rich about this, was figuring out a way in which the kind of the backdrop, right? Not just the backdrop of the city, but the backdrop of, as you say, Brandon, quite rightly, the pressures of that city kind of come forward. We talked about a few of those last night. I think the mechanic of faith is one example of something that is a constant ticking thing that people are aware of, and it's faith is defined differently in the book by different people, and it means something different to different people, but it's always there. It's a matter of what you have faith in, and all that sort of thing. That's up. That depends, but the idea that faith of something, even if it is in not having faith and sort of being convinced of the lack of it, that becomes this sort of constant drumbeat. So I think one of the ways that that's done within the game is to make sure that a lot of the reference points that we have, especially reference points for the city of Corel, are making constant commentary on the ways in which the religious conflict has affected various things there to begin with. So one of the conflicts that I talked about last night was the idea that there are these three large groups. I'm oversimplifying, but basically the religious groups that are constantly at each other's throats. There is the mercantile district where everyone's just trying to make some money, and the government, which is basically trying to keep open warfare from breaking out on the streets and maintain this kind of economic engine to the extent that it possibly can. And those three are roughly counterbalanced against each other, again, much the same way that Renaissance Renaissance era Venice had those elements kind of balanced against each other in the same respect. And so one of the things that is important then is that ends up shaping the way things work on a sort of one-to-one level. When you go into the church district and when you read about the things that you can find in North Corel, which is known as the church district more popularly, there will be references to the cathedral, which is the main building of the Order of Argoth. It is also the building which is found on the cover of this book. That in the background is supposed to be the cathedral. And it is defiantly, first of all, it is set against, if you think of like a college lawn, right, a huge rectangular lawn down which there are churches and cathedrals and shrines and chapels and so forth proceeding down. At the very end of them, the tallest, the largest, and almost obnoxiously so, is this, because this is the Order of Argoth. Yes, the Order of Argoth's people are extremely subtle and extraordinarily good at their job, but the order itself is very much we are the order, the religion of the just God. If you're not that, you're wrong. And we'll tolerate your existence until you become a problem to us. And that's what this represents. It is an act of sort of defiant, get the hell out of here. And ironically, that defiance is something which Grayshade then draws upon in a different way when he comes to work against that same organization, but defiance in a different regard. Trent wants to inspire Brandon O'Brien to do what exactly? Brandon's already inspired. Listen. I don't.
If I need to roll a die right now to continue talking,
is that what that means? I don't
that will
even
make this experience a whole
I
lot
don't even
more
understand.
awkward.
Oh my
But
god!
yes, I
That's
respect
funny.
that very much, Trent. Thank you.
That extra D6 that you get.
Yeah, it's not.
Friends
Oh
of
man,
ours.
it's just.
I
So,
will
but
save
anyway.
that Bardic Inspo for something.
Yeah, no, it'll be useful down the line. But anyway, also hi Legion and everyone who's coming. So anyway, so that image of the cathedral means that everything in the North District is somewhat lessened by its presence next to this enormous building. However, as we'll find as some of the other churches are detailed in North Corel in the church district, some of those churches then have made a virtue out of necessity. They are smaller, they are dwarfed by the cathedral, but they are also, while being to the side of this thing, they have the ability to have literally a different perspective. In the book, when Grayshade goes into the Chapel of Varda, for reasons I won't describe, but when he goes there, he looks at the cathedral literally from a different angle. Now, he has walked back and forth to do missions from the cathedral all the way down the lawn, all the way out of the district to various parts of Corel for a decade, right? Engaging in all these killings. But never has he done that and then looked back over his shoulder from the perspective of a church to the side and gone, oh, that's what the cathedral looks like when it's not the only thing I see. And so physically, literally, it's changing his perspective, right? And that's something which the players will be able to do as well, because this will not just be, this is a big church, this is a small church, this is a medium church. Instead, it will be, this is a smaller church which is humble in stature, but apparently holds much more within. There are legends that the chapel itself may have, things that are not obvious from the outside and so forth. And that when you dig below the layers of it, you find the reality of what that religion is. And that's just North Corel. The other areas will definitely be affected also by the religious conflict and by the mercantile conflict. The Tavern, the Honest Thief, which plays a prominent role in the book and which may or may not play a prominent role in our campaign if you continue to back. That thing, the Honest Thief, also is reflective of the mercantile district in which it exists because there is so much involved with money. It's there where we find the information brokers, where we find the people who use their resources to be able to gather and buy and sell information from interested buyers to interested sellers. And they do that because money here has become their god, right? It is the thing that matters the most. So each element of the city within the game that we describe will reflect the overall effect of all of those other elements that I've talked about upon them, so that you can't walk into a building that is described within the book without feeling like, okay, so this got here because of this happened for a reason. Like this building looks the way it does. These people are the way they are because of the conditions that we find ourselves within this particular spot. So that kind of thing, I think, will help to build this constant sense of verisimilitude, but also this sense from people that like they need to know what's happening in the city, and will encourage them, I hope, to dig deeper, below those layers to find out what's happening more within the city. So sorry for the long-winded answer.
Yeah, and for mechanics, right? So one of the mechanics that we're going to feature is going to be a faith mechanic. It's something I did in Witch Hunter. We're not going to do it the same way, because a Witch Hunter is more of a faith versus damnation balance. This is going to be this here is going to be like a faith and a resolve and a belief.
Yep.
Right. And faith isn't necessarily faith in one of the great churches.
Right.
Right. So your faith mechanic comes through there as soon as you put something, and you give a person, not only, I mean, they're already going to immerse themselves and say, my backstory says I'm the big fervent follower of whatever, I'm a merchant and all I care about is my bottom line. Or, I mean, they're already going to set something up, right? Or, I'm a merchant, but I really, my real goal is to, to help the poor or whatever it is. They'll have that in there, but they're going to have, a way to count that, use that, benefit from that by doing it, right? So if they don't, any faith mechanic you make, if they don't actually act faithfully to what they've said, then they're not going to grow in it. They're not going to benefit from it. That doesn't mean the character won't be viable, but that won't be their feature.
Right.
But they're going to be so encouraged to do it because it's something that you can get, right? It's something that you can do, and it's something that as players, a lot of times we're goal oriented, story goal, statistical, treasure goal. It depends what type of game you are, but or what type of game you're playing. But the simple fact that there's something that drives it, that you can use, that you can benefit from, is going to make it, it's going to make it a big thing. I got to tell you right now that, I'm mildly, like with Witch Hunter, I'm mildly disappointed that more people don't, buy into the damnation stuff, because I got to tell you, you get all kinds of goodies if you start doing damning things. You get all the stuff, right? You can re-roll, and you can succeed, and you can like not die. I mean, you can do all kinds of stuff, but no, I mean, there's
that
such
sounds like
reward.
something the devil would say.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I was just gonna say, like, what you can get if you get the undercoating on this damnation. I want some light damnation. I just some light damnation.
Fundamentally, and it never feels like that sometimes in the real world, because we disagree about so much stuff, and we think, that other 40% of these guys that believe this must all be, horrid, right? Humans or whatever. When we really get down to it, from 90-something% of gamers, ultimate power fantasy is to get super powerful and help other people, right? Yeah. I mean, it's, there is that guy, and everyone has that guy that you don't want to play with anymore. But really, when you get down to it, just think of all the games. The power fantasy is, we're going to work together, and then we're going to save the world, right?
And by the way, if I can add to that, I agree, and I think that's also important to recognize. I've mentioned quite a bit about the significance of hope in this book. I also think that comes through a little bit in the game also. Is it possible that you can play a character that is, engaged in activity that may not come across, that it is not what we would hope for in terms of a positive vision? Yeah, I guess. But part of the logic of the way that the game works is that as you discover more about stuff, it's very difficult to remain blind to what has led you to the point, has led you to these things. In other words, it's not just, I kill this guy and then I get this thing, and that's great, let's go drink it off at the tavern. You start to figure out that there is a cost to you, right? Not just to the person, but to you, to what you want to be. And there will always be, I think, an element of hope that exists within it, that you will want to be one of the people that breaks through and chooses to go in a different direction based upon the more that you know. In fact, I'm going to be really interested. One of our classes in the game that I talked about last night is the Informant, who again is this information broker who is extremely good at gathering, information and buying and selling it. One of the characters in the book is an exceptionally good information broker, and we don't get to explore for reasons I won't get into, we don't get to explore that much of their story because they're somewhat peripheral to what Grayshade's doing. But I would love the idea of being able to explore what is the cost to obtaining this information. It's not a costless thing, right? It's not that it doesn't hurt people to get it. It certainly hurts people when you sell it. It's information that can have a profound effect and perhaps a negative effect based on whom you give the information to and under what circumstances. So I would love to be able to see players play the informant and themselves go through this kind of arc, right? Where they're like, maybe it's not just about, maybe the argument that it's like, well, it's neutral and like, I'm not a bad guy. It's just neutral in its terms of how you use it. Yes, but anything that you use, even if it's neutral, can be used for those evil ends. And so maybe you do have to think about your clients, and maybe you can't just be like, well, once it's out of my hands, then listen, I'm not the problem. If you're making it possible and you are handing the knife or the equivalent of it to the bad person who does something bad with it, you are partly responsible for it. And I think that'll be interesting to see how someone like the informant deals with that stuff too. And that's what the game allows us to kind of explore a bit also. So,
and some of it is you don't want, a little bit, you just necessarily don't want to be subtle, right? This is a game of intrigue and subtlety and et cetera. But when we're telling people about it, sometimes, there's probably going to be, we're going to try to keep the book as much in sort of like character as possible as we like portray things, but there's going to have to be, sidebars or whatever that absolutely break the fourth wall and say, now this means you listen up. This is what the game is about, right? I mean, so, in Witch Hunter, I think around where advancement is, in the book, I have a sidebar where it's pretty much like, I don't want to hear that you're a non-combat witch hunter. You are the chosen champion of God, to fight for mankind. You are an impossible badass. I gave you a ton of points. Spend at least some of them on stabbing or shooting.
So you don't want a witch, you don't want a witch negotiator. Is that what you're telling me, Eric?
Well, I mean, no, you can totally be a great witch negotiator, but if you have to, you can also.
Where's the crossbow? Yeah, no, I'm with you. Yeah. Where's the crossbow?
There comes a point where you must fire at least
Van Helsing,
one
let's
shot.
go. Yeah.
I'm saying,
right.
Now there's in context. There's the person that really concentrated on it, and he's an impossible badass, not just a big time kick ass. But you come across some sort of like regular, like run of the mill monster, you should not be helpless in the, face of it, right? So when we're talking about this, we're going to say, understand that we want you to weigh the costs of your actions, right? So we want you to weigh the costs of your actions. So we're talking about you're talking about the informant, you're talking about whatever, conceptually, these might not, well, we're saying classes because we're shorthanded. Conceptually, these might not even end up being classes, right? We might use the classic D&D classes to a certain level, an archetype overlay, and make them sort of almost classless archetypes, right? So, and I don't mean that they're people with no class. I just mean, we can drop in, you're the fighter, but you're a fighter, but you're an informant, right? You're an information brokering fighter, right? But you can beat somebody up, right? Or you're information brokering rogue or whatever. So it's entirely possible we'll go that way with it. As far as mechanically, it's all going to come from Aaron's, Greg's input, Aaron's interpretation, right? We're going to make it, and we're going to make it work, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean, so we're using class as a shorthand. So I don't want to get too attached to the term, but a wizardly informant can be very cool because that's his methodology. I use this secret sonic misdirection wizardry to get in.
Oh yeah.
Find, right.
Sure.
If there's, a god of secrets and intrigue, I just, I use my, influence. Right. Yep. So a lot of that can play into it.
Absolutely. So, okay. I think we've got, Brandon, you want to take a couple of questions like from chat and throw away or modify or adjust?
I am very much excited to take some questions from chat, and I see one I see a question from Trendane. Because of course, with other 5e driven games, each class has some measure of combat effectiveness. How do character classes like Merchant or Information Broker have a chance of standing up against someone like an Acolyte? I mean, as you have already noted, you came in just around the time where we've just kind of touched on that, but that does kind of inform The kind of inverse to that as well, because there are three pillars to RPG play. There is the combat, and there's always also exploration and social engagement as well. And I'm kind of curious how you may have struck that balance with some of these new classes in particular in a way that feels both evocative to the setting and the world and the tone that you're going for, while also giving players not only the opportunity to do things that are not immediately obvious for that class, but to do those non-obvious things in particularly non-obvious ways. Like how does an informant fight? How does an acolyte socially engage with particular kinds of problems and stuff like that?
Right.
So yeah, go
No,
ahead, Eric.
I'm going to lean into that a little
Yep.
bit, right? So conceptually, obviously, these are almost the dramatic roles as opposed to the class roles. Like I said, we were using class. We're using class because it's a shorthand, right? If you think about it, if 5e was 4e or 5e was 3e, right? Eldritch Knight was a class, now it's a fighter archetype. Arcane Trickster was a class, now it's a rogue archetype, right? So Blade Singer was a class, now it's a wizard archetype, right? So when we come down here, I'm going to call back. Obviously we're not going to be like Gumshoe, but I'm going to use Gumshoe as an example, right? So in Gumshoe, there are certain things that people have to know, and you're going to find them out. I mean, you're just going to find them out. If the things aren't found out, the game ends. We don't want that, right? If
Yeah.
if someone can't roll a 10 and you have to pack up the whole adventure, you failed in your design, right? So in Gumshoe, you've got your hard-boiled guy. You got the guy that like breaks in and searches the place. You got the guy that like sweet talks it. You got the femme fatale who gets the guy to give it up and pillow talk. You got the guy that goes out on the street and beats it out of the thugs, right? So if you're the informant, you're an information broker, but you're source information. If you're a wizard, right? Yeah, a lot of your magic is going to be very much focused on finding stuff out, but that doesn't mean you don't have like some sort of way to do harm in your magic also, right? If you're going to be a merchant, you don't feel like getting robbed, right? So you're going to have some capability to defend yourself. So you could be a merchant now, but you could have been a soldier when you were a young man.
That's right. That's right.
So the way that you handle it is, and we have to decide whether this is a game in which it's okay to be someone who doesn't have a whole lot of combat utility, right? That actually works in a lot of role-playing games, right? It's just thematically, I was talking about Witch Hunter. It doesn't work. The premise is you're the chosen champion of mankind. He didn't choose, hey, sir, can't lift a feather. Go on out there and fight the werewolf, right? I mean, he's not really there to feed people to the bad guys' feet first, because to be a witch hunter, you have to have the wherewithal, the courage, and the knowledge, right? You can't just opt one of those three out of your character, right? So in this case, there's a lot of ways we can do it. We don't have to make it to where, there are people who play the suave debonair fighter, right? I mean, it just, it doesn't have to be that way. So we definitely want people to be able to participate in all aspects of the game.
And I'll add to that, because I think Trent's clarification, or further development there. So for players who heavily favor combat, how are you going to make the game Kickstarter appealing to players who don't care about things like gathering information? So I think that's a very good question, and there's several answers to that. The first is that and this sort of gets to Eric's point, in each of these, as we say, the classes that we're using a shorthand, but in each of these classes, there are different ways to shape them based upon the way in which you want that particular one to play out. So this also matches with the book, by the way. There are acolytes in Grayshade, in the Grayshade, the novel, who are trained killing machines like Grayshade, but seem to enjoy it. Right, that are they take real pleasure in my craft. Right, I'm thinking about Princess Bride. It's Count Rogan. It's a pleasure to watch you work. Right, there are those people who really love their work, and these are not the people, it should be said, who are these are not the people that are going to have the same kind of character-driven uncertainty that someone would have. They will be very much driven by wanting to do the thing in the best combat-oriented way that they can. And their statistics can reflect that. The skills that they choose to focus upon, the sonic magic, the sound shifting techniques they choose to adopt, those will allow them to do these things. So in that regard, there's no question that you will be able to have much more combat-oriented style characters. Moreover, as we've just talked about, these characters are not just given kind of like a suit of armor. Okay, so I want to play this. All right, well, that means sting, you will not be able to fight anybody. And like that's not how that's going to work, because as Eric pointed out, there are information brokers that are informants that are going to be just good at wheedling and begging and threatening if they feel like they've got the advantage. And there'll be those types, but there will also be the ones who will have a kind of sort of strength, or who know how to employ people who have a lot of strength and can beat it out of people. So there will be multiple different ways to focus on that. So the combat absolutely is something which will be able to be a part of this. And actually, Prince Justin, who was here and was kind enough to review Grayshade, commented on the action scenes within the book that he felt, I'm honored to say, were well realized and well presented. I want that to be reflected here as well. And one of the nice things is that 5e, I think, does a very good job in streamlining aspects of combat in a way that allow us then to focus on how that combat feels. So in the game, the feel of it, I think, is going to seem more theatrical, more theatrical, but combined with the brutality in certain cases of the Jason Bourne films, right? Think about how effective Bourne is at doing what he does, while also at the same time doing wildly athletic and incredible stuff. I think it's the Bourne Ultimatum. In the Bourne Ultimatum, there's a battle with an assassin who's been sent to kill him in Morocco, and they are battling in this house in Morocco, and they are, of course, supremely trained, so they're all using elements of their environment, and you can almost see the gears turning. Candlestick, throw this, block you with a blanket, turn it around, jump back, you pushed me into a bookcase, I have a shard of glass now, I'm going to use it to cut you. And every element of it is not only brutal, but also beautifully intricate in the way that it's designed and reflected. And that's because of the characters that they are and the way that they've chosen to play them. In a similar way, combat will be able to do the same sort of thing where you troll. The combat will be the same sort of thing in which you'll be able to reflect that combat that I think reflects the world. So yes, there will definitely be stuff there to do for people with combat. That said, though, one of the best aspects of Blades in the Dark to me is the fact that it is very viable to have characters that do not spend their time engaging in combat particularly, but really focus their attention on other things. And they may have to fight occasionally, but they really are not the ones that you want as your frontline people doing that. I think a little bit of leverage, right? You don't want Hardison being the guy who drops gloves most often. Doesn't mean that he can't occasionally do so.
He can
they
fight,
can. No, I know. I've
if
seen
you
it.
need someone
No,
to win
he
a
can.
fight, you need
He can
Elliot.
legit do that, but he is not the fighter guy whose name I already forgot.
Elliot Spencer.
Elliot. Yeah, he's not Elliot. Like, Elliot is ridiculous. But Elliot, by the same token, can actually kind of pull off a con man sort of thing. But you don't want Elliot to spend his whole time right up against the big boss playing this hardcore poker game. Like, at a certain point, you've got their skills are slightly, highlighted differently. So I think there'll be room for both of those in this way. And he's hot as hell. Yes, Trent. I figured that we would make sure that we had that in that regard. Anything else, Brennan, you want to throw our way?
So, I have two very brief closing questions, obviously. The one, very idly, a thing that I care about a lot when it comes to the how one creates atmosphere on the text of an RPG is also, like, as Eric had touched on earlier, when you give someone an RPG rulebook, the only thing that matters is that they essentially tell a story with it, and anything else, if you take a 5e game and decide you're not playing 5e, that's fine. But one of the most interesting things that I've discovered in a lot of indie RPGs that I've discovered, that I really attach to, is the idea that the game also tells you a little bit about not only the atmosphere you're supposed to present yourself in when you get into the game, but essentially what kind of play group you're supposed to be. Not necessarily in the sense of you're supposed to play this my way, but reminding players with a kind of author's note, as it were, that the goal of being present in this space is supposed to be healthy and critical and thoughtful. I think of, for instance, Thirsty Sword Lesbians, which has a section in its forward that literally says that no bigots are allowed to play it.
Right, yeah. Because Evil Hat's like,
or-
whatever. Like, just don't
Yeah.
play our game, you know. Which is
I recently reread Cyborg because it just came out, the Cyberpunk expansion to Morkborg, which has a rule 0 that literally reads, "You're encouraged to break every rule in this book except this one. Player characters cannot be loyal to or have sympathy to the corpse, the cops, or the capitalist system."
right, because that wouldn't be cyberpunk. Like,
Exactly.
if you're going to play as people literally in the cyberpunk, it's not cyberpunk to forget the punk part. You know, it's like the people who do steampunk and wear lots of gears and forget the part that involves trying to take down Victorian style empires. Like that's a little important as part of that. Sorry, Brandon, on you go.
Oh yeah, and the reason why I bring that up is as a result. I'm sure it hasn't even come up in the act of writing the book yet, but I'm kind of curious from both of you, Greg and Eric. If you could, as a kind of tagline to someone trying to figure out whether they're gonna play Grayshade, if you were to give them that kind of rule 0 about what the tone of the game is and essentially what people are supposed to get most critically and most radically from that game in that sense, similar to those kinds of things, what would that statement be? And I'll start with Eric.
Well, you start with me. I mean, he's the guy that made the
Because you feel challenged by it, and that's why I have
He did this to Rich last night too, Eric.
A good interview almost always
I know,
challenge their interviewees.
I'm
so
thinking
yes.
anyway, because so I have the same rule 0. I mean, obviously it's not the only one for Grayshade. It's not good, but you know, I have the double rule 0, right? Have fun, don't be a dick, right? So we cover those things. You have to remember that this is a social environment. You know, oh, that's what my character would do. No, listen, man, your character is what you would do, right? You determine it. So the first thing you have there, and what I would add for like Grayshade is we're going to have an information brokering, a little bit of intrigue, and a little bit of even maybe, you know, inter-party mild betrayal, and as they grow their characters. One of the things you have on there is have fun, don't be a dick, but also don't take it personally, right? Because part of the game is you're at odds until you are on the same page, right? So when you read about, you know, I mean, we're talking about Grayshade as a character who's been doing this for a decade, and he's having his faith challenged. Well, when he is not on the same page on page 5 with the people he runs into that he is at the end of the book, because he goes through his character growth. And I understand, you know, obviously it's a single protagonist. It's not exactly the same as a role-playing game, but it's okay to have characters not all be on the same mission until they are. And that makes the game stronger. So a lot of times, you know, I will play a lot of games where everybody has their own personal agenda. So we did this a lot with the L5R RPG. So one of the challenges you run into something that's a world that's a setting that's as well developed through the card game and through player expectation as Rokugan. It's like, well, I mean, why wouldn't Daidojuji just come save the day? Because jerk, it's this game, right? You know, so the way that you do it is you give everybody an agenda, and the agendas aren't really allied. And you have them come to a point where they will realize that they are loyal to each other in addition to their clans, and then your game moves forward. But it's okay to have, but you're losing the point of the setting if the lion and the crane start as the bestest friends. You know, if the scorpion and the lion are like, oh, I've never met you before, but I trust you completely, scorpion, that doesn't make any sense, right? So let yourself get through that. So, you know, have fun, don't be a dick. That's in all of them, but don't take it personal. Grow into your mission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I would say that you triggered a thought in me about that, and I'll probably remember it just in time for the stream to be over. But so two things I think would be sort of fundamental rules for me. Fundamental, like, kind of backdrop, be thinking about this. The first to kind of encapsulate some of what Eric was saying is over time play with each other. So, instead of, so again, different agendas, different things, but, and I remembered it, actually, not even before the end of the stream, play with each other. And I want to use Brandon's Blades in the Dark campaign as an example of people that gradually became more and more allied to each other. That's also what happened when I played Curse of Strahd on my channel, and the players gradually over time, though everything in Strahd is intended to push you apart as a group, because that is the influence of Strahd, the players end up being united against him. And that's very moving in certain ways, that people, despite their agenda differences, come to learn, as Eric says, organically. They're not forced to it, but they come to learn that they must function together. Surely we must hang together, or surely we will hang separately, is the famous quote, right? And they must learn then to be able to come together. So over time, play the game with each other. And then the second thing that I would say is play to illuminate, not increase the darkness. Now, how that comes out to you, whether that means that you are illuminating the darkness by gathering information because the truth will set you free. I mean, I'm not making a joke. The more information that you produce and gather and send around, that you could perhaps use it to bring down corrupt officials, that you could use that information to undercut merchants who are gouging the public and are stealing food from the poor and blah, 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 blah. You could become someone in that regard. If you were an investigator, your job almost literally is to illuminate and not increase the darkness. If you were going to increase the darkness, you'd become the criminal that you hunt, right? Instead, it's about illuminating that darkness. The same thing with an acolyte, even someone like a noble, right? Who in some ways has to ultimately learn how they are going to fit into this structure. So playing to illuminate and not increase the darkness. That gives you a lot of range within that. And a lot of times people will illuminate the darkness by doing some pretty dark acts to get to that point. And a lot of times people will have agendas before they get to the point where they play with each other. But I think those rules put together give people a sense that it is a dark world, but it is not a world that is one of despair. Because I wasn't interested in writing a world I'm not interested in writing Cthulhu. It's been done. I am interested in writing. It's the second time I got a shot in a Cthulhu, but I am much more interested in a world where there's darkness, that there are steps out of the darkness. That's kind of what I'm hoping the story of Grayshade may ultimately reflect. Whether it will be in enough time that, to save him, we'll find out. Also, I just want to mention, by the way, since we've been talking about that, I want to give a quick plug here. This book right here, The Clay That Woke by Paul Sega, is something I've been hoping at some point I can play. It is one of the most extraordinary rule books in this regard, and it's something which is on the back of my mind because I'm going to straight up write something like this for the opening little page, let's say, because he begins by saying, "A nameless minotaur guards from the roof of a wealthy estate as the sun rises over jungle in the background. Sunlight refracts brightly from the bronze head of his spear." And then there's a few more paragraphs. And then at the end of that opening page, "The City That Woke is a role-playing game. You play nameless minotaurs living and working among the people of the degringolade and the dangers of the jungle. A game master brings the world to life by creating your employment circumstances and creating and role-playing all the beings of the degringolade and jungle. You will try to uphold the difficult stoic minotaur philosophy of silence, and you'll earn a name." One of the most compelling opening paragraphs I've ever read in a role-playing book like this. And the reason is because it establishes immediately what kind of character you are, why it matters, the world that you're in, and you go from there. Now, again, the whole book is written like this, so it really is almost more like a novel than it is a rule book. We're not going to do it anywhere near that much because there are limitations, I think, to that. But what an extraordinary opening. And that's something which directly I want a page just like that, just like the opening page that Eric had written for Witch Hunter, in which you establish this sort of mode, the mood, and the environment of the game. So, Clay That Woke, check this out. I've interviewed Paul. He's a smart game designer, and this is
Paul is rad.
Really cool stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think we've learned a lot about Grayshade, about the RPG, about why people should play it. But my one final question, very, very briefly. Each of you have 10 words or less. Someone who really likes RPGs, someone who's been backing Kickstarter since Kickstarter started supporting tabletop role-playing games, comes to you at a con, maybe you're having a sandwich, maybe you're at your booth, and asks you to your face, what does Grayshade have that he has never experienced before? What do you tell that person in 10 words or less? And I'll start with Greg.
I wanted you to Eric's face. Eric had this panicked.
No, it's just
Okay.
like I'm counting words in my head here.
Exactly.
Mhm.
I got it though. And it's slightly drawn from the pitch line that I mentioned last night.
Mhm.
Jason Bourne, 15th century Rome, sonic magic, light from darkness. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Booyah.
Yeah, nice. That works. I'll take that. And Eric, what about you?
All right. So I don't actually have as quite a slick a handle on the property here, but from what I'm reading, I'm going to go with my 10 words right from here. God's primary assassin. Is he right or is he wrong?
Question mark
Nice.
10.
I love it. Oh God. And with that, thank you so very much again. I really dig everything that I've heard about Grayshade so far. This RPG sounds like it's going to be rad. I'm very excited for people to get to play it. I'm very excited for everybody in chat to either get to play it or to get to see us play it on this channel. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And I can't wait for people to get to see the thing. But again, a reminder to everyone in chat that the thing will exist if and only if we get that Kickstarter rolling. We are presently $11,000 in.
Yep.
That's like just under 50% of our initial goal.
That's right.
We are just over 60 backers away from our next backer goal, which would be an extra class for the RPG.
Yep.
Don't you want to know what that class is? I want to know what that class is. The book already has an investigator and an informant. I want to know what else is being hidden from me because it's already very exciting. So please lend your support if you haven't yet. Please share the news with all of your RPG friends. Just blast it out in all of your Discords and stuff like that, like I have been doing for the last couple of days. Let people know that this is actually really wonderful because I genuinely do believe in the story. Having read the book, I think that this is absolutely remarkable, and I'm very excited to give people the opportunity to get the RPG in their hands as well and be able to play in that world and experience that for themselves as themselves through play. So please lend your support however you can, and thank you so much for doing so already. Thanks, Greg, again for giving me an opportunity to ramble in the direction of all of Alligator Alley's team, because this has actually been very exciting to me, and I'm very excited to see what the thing looks like when it's done.
Brandon, as always, what an exceptional interviews on both days. Thank you, Brandon, for a lot of great questions. It is not lost to me, by the way, that Brandon's background is a ginkgo leaf.
Yeah, I did that for you. I was looking for this last night and couldn't find a good picture.
I love it. I love it. It is exactly what you see right there, chat, in case you're curious. Also a ginkgo leaf. I appreciate that. That's very, very cool. So that is not lost on me, although it appears to be lost on my camera to focus. Okay, good. But thank you for the wonderful interviews and the wonderful questions. Great stuff. And again, folks, if you have not seen Brandon O'Brien GM on this channel, let me remind you all that Brandon GM's Soundclash the Clampdown, which is the game that he has designed and is currently playtesting with a group of players on this channel. Brandon also, of course, has been the GM for originally a Blades in the Dark game, and now currently running a Fractal Spire Girl by Moonlight game as part of Speculate, our actual play podcast that Brandon and I co-host with Michael R. Underwood. And moreover, you can see Brandon as well in the Court of Blades game, playing alongside myself with Michael as the GM, and that is also taking place on this channel. And also, on top of all that, you should also be checking out Brandon's poetry, because Brandon is an exceptional poet, and you should get Brandon's book, which is right there. Can You Sign My Tentacle? I have it, and that reminds me that I'm going to need to make sure that I also get it signed again by Brandon at Gen Con. makes note, must take that book, make sure I don't forget it. And that is available through Interstellar Flight Press. And if you type in !tentacle, you will see how you can buy that. But seriously, Brendan, thank you so much, my friend. As always, brilliant work tonight. And Eric Wiener, of course, has joined us tonight. And Eric, it was a lot of fun. I'm really glad we got a chance to get your insights into this, and also coming from not just Witch Hunter, but looking at the ways in which you had to think about that and about, various games that you've worked on over the years, and also some of the principles that Alligator Alley has used. So thank you for being able to chat with us about all of that. Is there anything else besides Grayshade that you want to highlight that's going on with Alligator Alley or elsewhere in your world on a gaming level?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, we're really excited. We're actually starting to get a little angsty because we're waiting for print proofs from Lithuania with our for the Master Technician's Guide, which is our third core rule book for Esper Genesis, and that really is birthing the baby. The only thing that Kickstarter's done, except for an adventure anthology, right? Which will be the next thing. So we're super excited about that. We're hoping that it's the one finally we're going to have all three sitting on a table in front of us at a con finally, right? The Game Master screen's coming at the same time. We were able to get the two done together. I'm really excited with that coming down the pipe. We're exploring. It's all letters out. We've got a lot of exciting properties that we want to do as Esper Genesis games, but we don't have them, so I can't be like, woo, we got something, right? But that is definitely in the works, right? So we're really excited because once it comes down to it, we're going to look at basically all core product of the Esper Genesis Kickstarter, completed, right, with one adventure anthology, and that's our last commitment. And then we get the Forbidden Library. We need to get the this thing right here.
Haha.
We're going to get the the side quests and secrets, getting out to people. It's a little PDF. I'm just happy that we're delivering another stretch goal. We have to do a map, right? Once we do the map, then that comes down to an update of our very first product is Alligator Alley, which is the Demon Bane's Chronicle Part 1, which was the very first product we did, and that's the world upon which both the Forbidden Library and our upcoming Expedition to the Mysterious Peaks is set. So, putting all those Kickstarters in the rear view is going to let us really focus on, our next project for us.
It's going to be great. And also, of course, next month, as you know, chat, on this channel, we will be debuting Expedition from the Mysterious Peaks, and we'll be debuting that. I'm very excited about that and the players that we have assembled for you. I'm very excited to it's going to be great. And also the magic, the fantasy science fiction combination there, especially since in my world, the Esper Genesis characters, that campaign has come to an end. Are those characters forever gone? We will see if they have any influence on what is to come. But it is going to be great. And Eric, thank you again for this time, and again for Alligator Alley supporting this project. And I'm going to let both of these wonderful folks go. Thank you for a really entertaining conversation again. Chat, can we get some love for, once again, Eric Wiener and Brandon O'Brien? Thank you both so much for this convo. And we will be obviously in touch with each other over the next couple of weeks as Grayshade Kickstarter continues.
Hey, thank you. And thank you, Brandon.
Bye for now.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
All right. And that is going to do it for us, at least in regards to this. This was great. I was really glad that we got a chance to do these two streams. This, I hope, gave people who were watching either here or via the VOD later or via various clips a sense of what the game is like specifically. We've talked a lot about the books, of course, and we've talked about the game in more general terms, but this has given us a chance to drill down a bit, to look at the mechanics, and also to look at certain influences, touchstones, ways in which we're going to be able to communicate mood and feel within the game also. One of the reasons I'm so excited about this project is the fact that it brings together two great professional loves of mine, and that is storytelling is one of my great loves, but being able to storytell and have others collaboratively join in that storytelling as part of the game. Those two things combined together are really amazing for me, and so I'm really really excited that I have the chance to work with such great companies, and I'm very grateful to the entire company of Alligator Alley, which has joined me over the last 2 nights, Rich Lescouflair, Christopher Negelin, and Eric Wiener tonight, for being part of this. And I want to send yet another shout out to Brendan O'Brien for just really, really great, searching, thoughtful interview questions, and a really pleasant chat so that we could really talk this through and kind of get to the root of these things. I think Arudinel said last night that Brandon's very good at a question that doesn't beat around the bush, but also gives one room to maneuver. And that's, I think, the best example of what one should do. It goes straight to the point, but does so while allowing you to have that opportunity for change in the experience to kind of work with it. So that was really cool. So thank you, Brandon, so much for that. As for us, chat, before I talk about and wrap up for the evening, I do want to make clear that we did pretty well today, but we've got more work to do. We are sitting right now at 137 backers, 11,033. Let's remember that when we get to 200 backers, we will get a bonus class for the 5e game. And then, of course, there are more stretch goals that will be unlocked at that point. Moreover, when we get to those numbers, we are closing in on 50% funded, and we are almost 50% of the way through the Kickstarter. So getting over to the Kickstarter, following the Kickstarter, so that you can be notified when it comes closer to funding. If you've already hopefully pledging to the Kickstarter, and if you've already done so, but haven't yet gotten the audiobook, remember, Trend's audiobook will now be available when we fund. So once we fund, that means that the audiobook is funded. That is no longer a stretch goal, and you can add it on at any pledge level. So no matter what you backed it as, $10 now will get you access to that audiobook when Trent has completed it. So it's going to be very, very good. I think it's a really cool addition to this, and I'm hoping that's going to get some serious forward momentum because, just Trent's work is incredible. You're going to see that again when I play this video. So the more that we're able to support and move things forward, I think the better. Beyond all that, spreading the word is really important as well. Doing so through Twitter. We've asked people, and I see that folks have been doing it, so thank you, not to just retweet, because retweets don't get seen as much, but to quote tweet. So when something happens, if you retweet it and then quote tweet it specifically and say something like, I'm really excited about this project, or I can't wait to see this, or this person's a good person and you should support them because I think they're cool, or whatever it is you choose to say. It can be very small, but those quote tweets really help boost the algorithm and help us get the word out. And of course, using that hashtag Gray Assassin, when you can do that, also helps us track how this stuff is all happening. Otherwise, I would encourage everybody to be able to spread it to whatever social networks you're on, whether it be Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, world of something, I don't know, Reddit, whatever stuff that you're doing, please spread the word and let people know. And please encourage folks to come and check it out and follow and support and back when they can. The more that this builds up, the better this is going to get. We've got some amazing things set down the line, but it only happens if we get funded. And so we're going to see if we can do that. We backed at 90. Do I get 9 audiobooks? Not exactly what I meant. The $10 is a unique and compartmentalized audiobook cost. But anyway, if folks are able to do that, that would be great. And again, you can do that by going to Kickstarter.com/projects/alligatoralley /Grayshade. That's GRAYSHADE. And if you can do that, then you will get over there and you will be able to support and back the project. And thank you all so much for doing that if you have already. And again, if you haven't, please spread the word because this will be pretty cool. On the channel front, we are going to be off tomorrow, Thursday, but we will be back here on Friday. Friday is going to have, in all likelihood, 2 things. Mike Underwood is actually going to be doing a world building stream based upon the stuff that we did for Court of Blades. He's going to be furthering on with that world building stream, and I believe he's going to be joined by Brandon O'Brien in that as well. I will probably not be joining that stream because I'm going to have family stuff that I have to attend to. I will try to stream later that night, so probably Mike is going to be doing his thing from about 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern is what I have on the schedule, and then I will be trying to jump in to do a stream later on, probably of Triangle Strategy and of course talking about Grayshade at 9 p.m. So that's what we're looking to do on Friday. And then on Saturday, I am working out July's schedule as we speak. My best guess is that July is probably going to be a Triangle Strategy thing, and then we'll start getting more into tabletop as stuff goes along. But that will be the way that happens. But we'll see when that happens when we get there. So That's going to be it for tonight, though. I'm not going to push too much channel stuff because I wanted the focus to be on Grayshade, except to say, please follow the channel. Please support all the ways you know how to support the Patreon, subbing to the channel, all that kind of good stuff. Please spread the word about the channel as well. Please do subscribe to us over on YouTube, though, because the YouTube channel will also have videos like this available for people. Please also keep your eyes peeled for my Twitter when I'm going to be announcing various things that happen over the course of the next couple of weeks, because I'll be available there. !ARV tweets for that. And most importantly tonight, !Grayshade KS to be able to support that Grayshade Kickstarter. That would be much appreciated. Otherwise, I want to thank everyone for being awesome today. Thank you to my wonderful mods as always, Rudnell, Dragonspear, Garlic Tofu, Rock God, Triffity Mats, and of course the Rising Tides. Wonderful work from all of them. Amazing people, amazing mods, best in the business. And again, special thanks to the Rising Tides tonight for the wonderful interview questions 2 nights in a row. And thank you to my wonderful subscribers. Thank you to Polar. Thank you to Wispy Song. Thank you to Crit Twitch, to Gon Eden, to Mrs. Dunsel, to Prince Justin, and thank you to all those other mods I just mentioned who were all supporters as well. Thank you to all of those lovely folks. And thank you to the viewers. Thank you to 420. Thank you to Asum Casa. Thank you to Larencraft. Thank you to Son of God. And thank you to the aforementioned Turbo Tango, who is a mod, so I don't know why he's not showing up as that in here, but you will see more of Turbo Tango coming up in a couple of nights. That's it for me. Thanks, everybody. Much love to you all. Please stick around because I'm going to be showing off here this awesome video, which is the Kickstarter video. And I will be back to you, lovely folks, as I say, on a Friday night after Mike. So make sure that you stop in for Mike at 7 p.m. Eastern. That's going to be it for me. Much love, everyone. And I will catch all of you wonderful people down the line. Until then, everyone be good to each other. Have a good night.
By hating death, you become its servant. By loving it, you become its master. You must always choose love, the first rite of devotion. A dark faith for a darkening city. Justice is balance. Within the towering walls of Corel, all bow to the Order's authority. Grayshade is the supreme executor of the Order's edicts, until he does the most dangerous thing an acolyte of Argoth can do. He begins to ask questions and search for answers. Now, you can join his search. Independent publisher Athos Arts has just published the novel Grayshade, a dark fantasy by award-winning author Gregory A. Wilson. Now the world expands. Alligator Alley Entertainment, publishers of Tales and Tomes from the Forbidden Library and Expedition from the Mysterious Peaks, is pleased to announce its Kickstarter for the Grayshade universe, supporting 2 major product lines. First, Athos Arts' publication of books 2 and 3 in the Grey Assassin trilogy, Renegade and Heretic, and second, Alligator Alley's publication of a brand new Grayshade tabletop role-playing game, powered by the 5th edition of the world's greatest role-playing game and designed by writers Aaron Rosenberg and Rich Lescouflair. This game will give you the chance to explore the streets of Corel for yourselves, with detailed city maps, secret histories, unique starting classes, custom magic systems and mechanics, and more. The acclaimed gaming accessory maker Norse Foundry will be producing a limited edition, individually numbered Founders coin for founding backers based on the Grayshade world, featuring an illustration by artist Tallytoons. Years of work have gone into this project, from concept to design to execution, and we've assembled a team of experts dedicated to launching this new world with some of the best speculative fiction and tabletop role-playing experiences possible. But to truly realize our vision, one final component remains: you. Join Gregory A. Wilson, Alligator Alley, Athos Arts, Norse Foundry, and our team of dedicated creatives by supporting the project and spreading the word. Thank you. Together, we will bring the world of the Grey Assassin to full and vibrant life. You must always choose love.